Hello and welcome to the CX Files for October 24th, 2024. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm down here in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan in Montreal, Canada, where it's getting excruciatingly cold right now. I hope, Mark, that you're lavishing in the sun and the soon-to-be summertime of Brazil and Sao Paulo. I know I've been down to visit you a number of times. It's always been your winter. It's always seemed very summery to me, though, in June and July. So I could only imagine what it's like currently.
Yeah. No, it's getting much better. It's getting much warmer. I'm just here in my t-shirt and enjoying the sun.
Kind of reminds me of your last trip to Malta.
Well, that was definitely lots of time spent on the beach.
Yeah, certainly, I would say so. And I understand there's a Scottish pub of well renown over there too.
I think all of those places have closed down now, and that's a good thing too.
Yeah, well, on to more exciting and appropriate elements for the CX files. Now, this is going to be another edition for our listening audience that might recall the chat that Mark and I had a couple of weeks ago, where we talked a little bit about my impressions of what was happening in the Philippines, where I recorded it from my hotel room in Tokyo. And today, what we're going to do is chat a little bit about, Mark, some work you've done on a recently published book, which I believe is titled The Social Sales Playbook. So I'd love to get a little bit of a synopsis from you about the book itself. What's it about, why you wrote it, and what you feel were some of the key elements around the takeaways that you'd like people to be able to glean from it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Well, it's the subtitle is developing a B2B sales plan that drives results, and that's really a lot of the areas that I've been involved in for a long time now. Although I don't personally work in sales. I've never actually been a professional salesperson, but I've spent years supporting salespeople, and so I kind of see how big companies sell, how small companies sell, and I'm sure that this is your experience as well, because we work in an environment where it is B2B. We are looking at BPOs trying to get clients, and software companies selling into BPOs or selling directly to big companies that need customer service systems. So all these kind of B2B relationships are very interesting, and they've actually changed dramatically over the period of COVID. um, I think if you go back in time to the last decade, then as you know, a lot of the sales process around this business was conferences, events, a lot of meetings, lunches, flying around to go and see people, and COVID kind of knocked that on the head for a couple of years, and it really intensely focused people on thinking much more about what is my online profile, how do I come across as an expert in my industry when somebody searches for me on Google. And this kind of thing is backed up by some research. Like Harvard Business Review had a study that explored how do B2B buyers make a decision around who they buy from, and they found that 82% were very influenced by the online profile of the salesperson. And so that just goes to show you that if you if you're thinking of buying from a BPO and the salesperson gets in touch with you and you search for them on LinkedIn and they haven't updated LinkedIn for 6 months, and you search for them on Google and you can't find anything except a PowerPoint from 10 years ago, then it doesn't make them look like a very serious player. So that's really what this is all about, is like, how do you develop a sort of profile that makes you look like a professional online?
And I think that this is very important because, as you say, there are still vestiges of the pre-pandemic sales approaches. Trade shows are quite popular right now. There seems to be more of them than I can ever imagine. And definitely there is a value for the whole in-person being able to shake a hand factor when you're picking somebody. But you raise a very interesting point in the sense of the online profile counts for a lot. And speaking personally, if I'm looking for a supplier of something, whether it's maybe home maintenance, maybe it's legal services, maybe it's a finance professional, if I can't find an online presence and all I can do is a Google search and find a telephone number, there's no website, there's no LinkedIn profile, I'm much less likely to actually want to engage with somebody as opposed to an individual or an organization that actually does have that online home.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And the thing is that, this stuff really does matter. It's not just sort of academic journals. Gartner is an analyst that everybody knows, and they've actually said that about two-thirds of the B2B buying decision is made before an RFP goes out. So, before they try to do a selection between different suppliers, the managers already kind of know who they want and who they trust and who are the people they know in the industry. So this is really about making sure that you're not really actually directly trying to sell anything. It's more like you're the person that they come to when they want help.
Something that I think was really interesting. I was chatting with a friend of mine. Well, actually, it's a mutual friend. And they were telling me one time that if a company reaches out to them to talk to them about doing some work, generally speaking, there's about an 80% chance that they're going to win that business because of the fact that there's already been that reach out. And I would tend to agree. The reality is that when you're in a B2B situation, you're the client, you really do have in mind an individual or a team that you would like to engage with for a particular project. But then that raises the question then, Mark, if there's a lot of work out there, and I think we can all agree that in the B2B environment, there's always contracting going on. Even if somebody has an online presence, even if they have a LinkedIn profile that's robust and they have a website that's relatively well organized, what do you have to do to stand out in this online marketplace to make sure that you're not going to be one of many, but you're actually going to be one of the few that's going to be seen as unique and distinct?
Yeah, I think that you definitely need to have an opinion. You need to have a view. You need to show that you understand your industry. And a good way to sort of demonstrate this would be, let's say you're a BPO salesperson, and your patch is services. You want banks to notice what you're doing and what you're saying. I mean, you need to be publishing thought leadership about what's the future of banking, what's going to happen next year in banking, what are banking customers going to be expecting in the next 18 months. So showing that you've got these kind of ideas and thoughts, and just demonstrating that kind of thought leadership, because that's the sort of stuff that will get you noticed. And you can even talk about some of your prospects in some of these articles as well. I mean, that's what will definitely get you noticed. And then there's people like us. If somebody writes a blog that says, I heard in CX Files last week, blah, 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 then of course that's going to get our attention because we'll notice that they're commenting on us. So there's lots of ways to show that you've got an opinion and show that you're smart and you're thinking about your industry and what you're doing. But then you can sort of tweak it to make sure that you get noticed.
So, Mark, based on the research that you did, where are the most effective places for doing this B2B publishing or thought leadership? Is it what I think everybody's assuming? Is it LinkedIn, or are there other forums that you can use to try and get some visibility?
Well, right now it's mostly LinkedIn. Yeah, that's true. And of course it depends on the type of business that you've got. I mean, uh, if you're running a company that's very visual, then it will be something more like Instagram or TikTok, or somewhere where you can share images. But for most of us, and certainly in our sort of CX focused space, it's much more likely that the decision makers are all hanging out on LinkedIn. So that's definitely where most of the interest is. But that doesn't mean that the only thing that you can do is just share some news stories on LinkedIn. You can share audio, video, images, infographics. There's lots of ways of sharing ideas that can get attention in a way that's not the the typical kind of feel good Instagram post that people seem to post on a Sunday morning about how inspired they are this weekend.
Yeah, no, I would tend to agree. And I think that people are growing tired and of these types of so-called inspirational posts about how eating your granola in the morning is making you feel good and ready to attack the day. People are really, I believe, growing wary of that type of stuff on LinkedIn. And you and I have talked about this many times on this podcast. The fact of the matter is thought leadership counts for a lot, and there can be a real standout if you can take a piece of thought leadership, not turn it into an advertisement or not turn it into a commercial for what you're doing, and genuinely say, here's what I'm picking up in the market, here's what I think is happening in the future, and here's what anybody in our space needs to be considering. Very good lessons in that regard.
Yeah. And I mean, just to sort of wrap up the conversation, I mean, I've been doing this professionally for the past couple of decades, and I've written speeches, white papers, articles, blogs for politicians, ambassadors, chief executives, sales directors, and so I've really seen what works and what doesn't work and what gets ignored. And we know what the kind of promotional articles are like on LinkedIn, where it's tips over into marketing and just promoting a company brand or something, then no one cares about that stuff. So what I'm really arguing for here is just show that you're an expert in your industry, and people will pay attention.
Okay, so final question then, Mark. Where can listeners pick up this book?
Well, if they just search for my name on Amazon, it should come up, or Social Sales Playbook.
Sounds good. Well, thank you very much for this insight. I know that I will be picking up a copy and reading it profusely. This is a topic that I think everybody in our space needs to be thinking about and thinking about objectively and deeply. So this is going to give, I think, as you say in the title, a real playbook in terms of how to go about doing so.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.
That's the only time the word scintillating has been used on the CX Files.